Two native men stumbled through the storm toward Machan, Washington's ranch, their desperate silhouettes illuminated by lightning against the dark Wyoming sky. Thunder crashed overhead as they collapsed at her door. Arthur Morgan clutched his bloody shoulder while John Crow Dog gripped a leather satchel like his life depended on it. Rain poured down their faces as they waited. Machan opened the door with her rifle ready. Her weathered hands held steady despite the shock of finding strangers on her doorstep. She studied their faces in the flickering lamplight. Arthur's eyes met hers. Something familiar lived there. Something that reminded her of dignity under pressure. "Please," Arthur said. "We need shelter, just until morning." Machan's finger stayed near the trigger. 5 years of peaceful isolation had taught her caution. 5 years of speaking only to her horses and the photograph on her mantle. "I don't get involved in other people's troubles." John swayed on his feet. His young face was pale with exhaustion and fear. "They'll kill us if they find us." Another flash of lightning revealed torches moving through the darkness, distant but approaching. Machan counted at least 6 riders cutting through the storm. She looked at Arthur's wound again. Blood seeped through his torn shirt. The kind of wound that came from running hard and running scared. Her husband's voice echoed in her memory. Ezekiel always said a person's character showed clearest in how they treated strangers. "Get inside, quickly." She pulled them through the doorway and barred the door behind them. Her hands trembled as she set down the rifle. The peaceful life she'd built was ending. The ranch house felt smaller with 3 people inside. Machan's sanctuary had been designed for solitude. Every corner held memories of quiet evenings and silent mornings. Arthur slumped against the wall while John clutched his satchel. Both men dripped rainwater onto her clean floors. "Let me see that shoulder," Machan said. She fetched medical supplies from her kitchen cabinet. The same supplies she'd used on injured horses and the occasional cut from ranch work. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency. Arthur winced as she cleaned the wound. "Bullet grazed you. You're lucky." "Doesn't feel lucky." John stood guard by the window. His young eyes tracked the storm outside. "They're still out there." Machan worked in silence. The wound was clean but deep. Arthur would need rest and proper care. Neither seemed likely, given their circumstances. "What did you two do?" she asked. Arthur and John exchanged glances. Some conversation passed between them without words. The kind of communication that came from shared danger. "We were accused of stealing military supplies," Arthur said finally. "Did you?" "No." The simple answer carried weight. Machan had heard enough lies in her life to recognize truth when she heard it. She finished bandaging Arthur's shoulder and stepped back. "Who's hunting you?" "Colonel Dutch van der Berk. He's got a full cavalry unit." The name meant nothing to Machan. She'd avoided military affairs since Ezekiel's death. The army had taken enough from her. John moved away from the window. "They're coming closer." Machan extinguished the lamp. Darkness filled the room except for the dying fire in her hearth. She moved to the window and peered through the curtains. 6 riders approached through the storm. Their torches flickered like angry stars against the black sky. They moved with military precision despite the weather. "Root cellar," she whispered. "Behind the kitchen." Arthur struggled to his feet. John helped support him as they moved toward the back of the house. Machan lifted the heavy wooden door that led to her underground storage. "Stay quiet no matter what you hear." The men descended into the darkness. Machan closed the door and scattered flour sacks over it. She relit the lamp and tried to look normal. The riders reached her porch as she settled into her chair with a book. Their boots thundered on her wooden steps. Someone pounded on her door. "Open up, military business." Machan took her time reaching the door. She opened it to find a tall man in a colonel's uniform. His face was sharp and cold. Rain dripped from his hat brim. Colonel van der Berk, he said. We're tracking 2 dangerous fugitives. Apache men who murdered soldiers and stole weapons. Haven't seen anyone. Van der Berk studied her face. His eyes were the color of winter sky. You're sure about that? I'd remember seeing anybody out in this storm. These men are armed. And dangerous. They've killed good soldiers. You'd be duty-bound to help us find them. Machan kept her expression neutral. Like I said, haven't seen anyone. Van der Berk stepped closer. Water pooled at his feet on her clean floor. Mind if we search your property? I do mind. It's late and it's storming. These are dangerous men, ma'am. They could hurt you. I can take care of myself. Van der Berg's smile was cold as January wind. I'm sure you can. But we'll be watching the area tonight, case they show up. He touched the brim of his hat and stepped back into the storm. His riders followed him into the darkness. Machan watched until their torches disappeared before closing the door. She waited 10 minutes before opening the root cellar. Arthur and John emerged like ghosts from the underground darkness. Both men were shivering from cold and fear. He's gone, Machan said. For now. Arthur leaned against the kitchen table. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. He knows I'm lying. John set his satchel on the table with careful hands. Then we need to leave, in this storm, with your friend bleeding? You wouldn't make it a mile. Machan poured coffee from the pot she kept warm on her stove. The familiar ritual steadied her nerves. Everything was changing too fast. Why would soldiers want to kill you over stolen supplies? She asked. Arthur accepted the coffee with grateful hands. Because we weren't stealing. We were trying to stop something bigger. What's bigger than theft? John's hand moved protectively. Over his satchel. Murder. The word hung in the air like smoke. Machan felt the weight of it settling on her shoulders. She'd wanted simple answers. Instead, she was getting drawn into something dark and complicated. Outside, the storm began to fade. Dawn would come soon. With it, Van der Berk would return. Her peaceful life was over. Dawn broke gray and wounded over the Wyoming hills. The storm had passed but left the earth scarred with mud and broken branches. Van der Berg's riders had withdrawn beyond the ridge, but their presence lingered like smoke. Machan watched from her kitchen window as the cavalry disappeared into the morning mist. Her coffee had gone cold in her hands. Sleep seemed impossible now. Arthur sat at her table, his wounded shoulders stiff beneath the bandages. John stood, guard by the door, still clutching that leather satchel. The weight of unspoken secrets filled the room. They'll be back, Arthur said. I know. John's young face was drawn with exhaustion. We should go. We've brought enough trouble. You won't make it far. Not with him bleeding. Machan refilled her coffee cup. The simple act felt strange with strangers in her kitchen. 5 years of solitude had made her forget how to share space. Tell me about this murder, she said. John looked to Arthur. Some silent conversation passed between them. Trust was currency they couldn't afford to waste. Arthur's fingers traced the rim of his coffee cup. Van der Berk has been selling army weapons to Mexican bandits. We found out. How? I was scouting for his unit. Saw the exchange myself. Machan studied his face. The lines around his eyes spoke of difficult choices. Why didn't you report it? To who? He's got half the territory under his command. John stepped away from the door. His grip on the satchel tightened. Show her, Arthur nodded slowly. John placed the satchel on the table and opened it with careful hands. Inside were military documents, shipping manifests, and correspondence. Papers that could hang a man. We weren't stealing, Arthur said. We were trying to stop an arms deal. Machan scanned the documents. Her husband had taught her to read military paperwork. The evidence was damning. Van der Berk had been selling weapons for months. This proves everything, she said. That's why he wants us dead. The words settled heavy as winter soil. Michan understood now why Vanderberg had looked so cold. He wasn't just chasing thieves. He was eliminating witnesses. John closed the satchel. "There's more." Arthur's jaw tightened. "John." "She needs to know." John's young voice carried old pain. "Your husband, Ezekiel Washington. He was investigating Vanderberg before he died." The coffee cup slipped from Michan's fingers. It shattered against the floor, sending dark liquid across the worn boards. The sound echoed in the sudden silence. "What did you say?" Berk had him killed, made it look like an accident." The kitchen walls seemed to close in. Michan's breath came short and sharp. 5 years of grief. 5 years of accepting that accidents happened. 5 years of building a life around a lie. Arthur watched her face. "I'm sorry. How do you know?" "I was there. Saw him talking too. Officers about weapons going missing. Next day he was dead." The floor beneath Michan's feet felt unsteady. Everything she'd believed about her husband's death was crumbling. The routine patrol that went wrong. The horse that threw him. The broken neck that could have happened to anyone. He was murdered, yes. Michan's hands shook as she knelt to clean up the broken cup. The fragments cut her fingers, but she barely noticed. Blood mixed with coffee on her kitchen floor. Arthur stood despite his wounded shoulder. "Let me help." "Don't." She gathered the pieces. With careful precision. Each fragment was sharp enough to draw blood. Sharp enough to cut through 5 years of careful healing. "The papers he was gathering," John said quietly. "They're in there too." Michan's fingers stilled. She looked at the satchel with new understanding. Her husband's final investigation. The work that had gotten him killed. He died for this. He died for the truth. Outside, horses approached through the morning mist. Vanderberg had returned with more men. Michan counted at least a dozen. Riders surrounding her property. "Get back in the cellar," she said. Arthur shook his head. "He'll search this time. Then we hide you somewhere else. There's nowhere else." Vanderberg's voice carried across the yard. "Mrs. Washington, come out. We need to talk." Michan stood slowly. Glass fragments fell from her hands to the floor. The sound was soft, as rainfall. She walked to the window and saw Vanderberg sitting his horse in her yard. He looked different in daylight. Older, harder, the kind of man who'd grown comfortable with necessary evils. "Stay hidden," she whispered. Arthur caught her arm. "He knows. Then we make him prove it." Michan stepped onto her porch. The morning air was cold against her skin. Vanderberg's men formed a loose circle around her house. Their rifles were ready but not raised. "Colonel," she said. "Mrs. Washington. Sleep well?" "Well enough." Vanderberg dismounted and approached. Her porch. His boots left deep prints in the mud. Funny thing about storms. They wash away tracks. Make it hard to follow a trail. I wouldn't know. "See, my men found horse tracks leading this way. 2 riders moving fast. Trail ends at your property." Michan kept her face neutral. "Lot of wild horses in these hills." "These weren't wild horses. These were cavalry mounts. Stolen from fort. Collins 3 days ago. Like I said, haven't seen anyone." Vanderberg climbed the steps to her porch. Up close, his eyes were pale and calculating. "You know what I think? I don't much care. I think you're harboring fugitives. I think you're lying to a federal officer." The accusation hung between them. Michan felt the weight of choice settling on her shoulders. She could still step back, still claim ignorance, still preserve the peaceful life she'd built. But peace built on lies wasn't peace at all. "Prove it," she said. Vanderberg smiled. The expression was cold as winter wind. "I intend to." He gestured to his men. They dismounted and began spreading out around the property. Some headed for the barn. Others moved toward the house. You can't search my property without cause. Dead soldiers are cause enough. Van der Berk pushed past her toward the door. Mitchen's hand moved to the rifle, leaning against the wall. The motion was subtle, but Van der Berk noticed. I wouldn't, he said. This is my home, and this is my territory. Van der Berk entered her house with 3 of his men. Michan followed, her heart pounding against her ribs. The sound of boots on her floor felt like violation. They searched methodically, overturned furniture, scattered her belongings, treated her sanctuary like a crime scene. One soldier approached the flour sacks covering the root cellar. Mitchen's breath caught in her throat. The man's boot touched the hidden door. Sir, he called, something here. Van der Berk crossed the kitchen in quick strides. He kicked aside the flour sacks and revealed the cellar door. His smile was sharp as a blade. Well now, he said. What have we here? The moment stretched taut as a drawn bowstring. Mitchen's hand tightened on her rifle. Van der Berg's men readied their weapons. Open it, Van der Berg commanded. Mitchen's finger found the trigger. The choice was made. Van der Berg lifted the cellar door with slow deliberation. The hinges creaked like old bones. Darkness yawned beneath the kitchen floor. Come out, he called into the shadows. We know you're down there. Silence answered him. The kind of silence that stretched tight as wire. Mitchen's finger rested on her rifle trigger. The metal was cold against her skin. Van der Berg's men had their weapons ready, but not aimed, yet. Maybe nobody's down there, one soldier said. Van der Berg's pale eyes studied the cellar opening. Light. A soldier handed him a lantern. Van der Berg held it over the opening and peered into the darkness. Root vegetables and grain sacks filled the space, nothing else. Arthur and John had vanished. Van der Berg climbed down into the cellar. His boots thudded on the dirt floor. He searched behind every barrel and crate. Found nothing but supplies and spider webs. They were here, he said, climbing back up. I can smell them. Michan kept her face neutral, smell of root vegetables and old potatoes. Don't play games with me. Van der Berg's jaw tightened. He'd been certain of his prey. The empty cellar was a slap to his pride. Search the barn, he ordered his men. Check every stall and hay bale. The soldiers filed out of the house. Their boots thundered across the porch and down the steps. Van der Berg remained in the kitchen, studying Michan's face. Where are they? Don't know what you're talking about. The Apache men, the ones who murdered my soldiers. Michan met his stare. Haven't seen any Apache men. Van der Berg stepped closer. His presence filled the small kitchen. You're protecting killers. I'm protecting my home. From what? From men who break down doors and scatter my belongings. Van der Berg's smile was thin as a blade. You think you're clever. I think I'm tired of strangers in my kitchen. Outside, the soldiers searched the barn. Their voices carried across the yard. Horses nickered and stamped as unfamiliar hands disturbed their peace. Nothing in the barn, sir, a soldier called. Van der Berg's frustration showed in the set of his shoulders. Check the ridge. They couldn't have gone far. Half his men rode toward the hills. The others remained stationed around the property. Van der Berg wasn't leaving anything to chance. This isn't over, he told Michan. Never thought it was. Van der Berg mounted his horse and rode after his men. Michan watched from her porch as they disappeared into the morning mist. The hoofbeats faded, but the threat remained. Arthur and John emerged from the hayloft an hour later. They'd hidden in the barn's upper reaches while soldiers searched below. Dust covered their clothes and cobwebs clung to their hair. How long do we have? Arthur asked. Not long. He'll be back. John clutched the satchel containing the evidence. We need to get these papers to someone who can act on them. Who? Van der Berg controls half the territory. Federal marshals. They're not under his command. Michan poured coffee for the three of them. The simple act felt strange after the morning's violence. Normal routines and abnormal times. Nearest marshal is in Cheyenne, she said. 3 days' ride. We'll never make it with him hunting us. Arthur tested his wounded shoulder. The bandage had held, but movement brought pain. What about the territorial governor? He's in Vanderberg's pocket, John said. Saw the correspondence. Myself. The weight of their situation settled heavy as winter snow. They were trapped between a corrupt colonel and a hostile wilderness. No law to protect them, no authority to trust. There's another way, Michan said quietly. Both men looked at her. Coffee steamed in the silence. We make our stand here. Arthur shook his head. 3 against his whole unit? We've got advantages. I know this land. You know tactics. John's got the evidence. It's suicide. Maybe, but running is certain death. Michan walked to the window and studied the surrounding hills. Her ranch sat in a natural depression surrounded by rocky ridges, good for defense if properly used. My husband taught me military thinking, she said. High ground, clear fields of fire, limited approaches. Your husband was a soldier? Buffalo. Soldier, 10th Cavalry. Arthur's expression shifted. Recognition and respect mixed in his dark eyes. What was his name? Ezekiel Washington. I knew him. The words hit Michan like a physical blow. She turned from the window to face Arthur. You knew my husband? Briefly. He came to the fort asking questions about missing weapons. Van der Berg had him escorted out. When? Week before he died. The timeline made terrible sense. Ezekiel had been investigating Van der Berg's operation. He'd gotten too close to the truth. He was a good man, Arthur said. Talked about justice. About doing what was right. He talked about me. Said his wife was the strongest person he knew. Said she could handle anything. Michan's throat tightened. Ezekiel's faith in her reached across 5 years of grief. He'd believed in her. Strength even when she'd forgotten it herself. Then we fight, she said. John looked between them. Against a full cavalry unit? Against murderers and thieves. Arthur stood despite his wounded shoulder. If we're doing this, we need to prepare. They spent the afternoon fortifying the ranch. Michan showed them the natural defensive positions. The well-protected water source. The clear sight lines to all approaches. Arthur shared his knowledge of military tactics. How to create crossfires. Where to place obstacles. How to make a small force seem larger. John proved surprisingly resourceful. He helped move supplies and ammunition. Turned furniture into barriers. Prepared escape routes if the defense failed. As evening approached, they gathered in the kitchen for what might be their last meal. Beans and hardtack washed down with strong. Coffee, the food of soldiers and settlers. Why are you helping us? Arthur asked. Michan considered the question. Because my husband would have. That's not enough reason to die. Maybe not, but it's enough reason to fight. Outside. The sun set behind the western hills. Darkness crept across the land like spilled ink. Van der Berg's men were still out there, waiting, planning. He'll come at dawn, Arthur said. Full assault. Let him come. Michan checked her rifle one. Final time. The weapon felt familiar in her hands. Ezekiel had taught her to shoot. Had made her practice until she could hit a silver dollar at 50 yards. For what it's worth, John said, I'm glad we came here. Even knowing what it might cost, especially knowing. Arthur nodded agreement. Better to die fighting than live running. They settled into their positions as full darkness fell. Michan took the main house. Arthur positioned himself in the barn. John found cover near the well. The night stretched long and cold. Wind whispered through the grass. Coyotes called from distant hills. The sounds of a world that would continue regardless of human struggles. Van der Berg's attack would come with the dawn. But for now, 3 unlikely allies waited in the darkness, each carrying their own reasons for fighting, each understanding the cost of their choice. The ranch that had been Mitchen's sanctuary would become their fortress. The place where she'd hidden from the world would become the place where she'd make her stand. Her husband's memory deserved that much. Justice deserved that much. They deserved that much. Dawn broke gray and merciless over the Wyoming hills. Vanderberg's cavalry appeared on the ridge like dark birds against the pale sky. Mitchen counted 20 men. Too many for a simple arrest. This was an execution force. Arthur signaled from the barn. 2 fingers, then a closed fist. Vanderberg was splitting his forces. Standard military tactics for surrounding a defensive position. John crouched near the well, the satchel of evidence secured beneath loose stones. If they died, at least the truth might survive. Vanderberg rode down the slope alone, a white cloth tied to his rifle barrel, the universal signal for parley. His horse picked its way carefully through the morning mist. "Mrs. Washington," he called, "come out. Let's end this peacefully." Mitchen stepped onto her porch. Her rifle remained inside but close at hand. Define peaceful. You surrender the fugitives. I guarantee your safety. What about their safety? Vanderberg's smile was thin as winter ice. They're murderers. They'll face justice. Your justice or real justice. There's no difference. The lie hung between them. Vanderberg had grown comfortable with necessary evils. Justice was whatever served his purposes. I need guarantees, Mitchen said. You're hardly in a position to negotiate. 20 men to arrest 2 fugitives? Seems excessive. Vanderberg's pale eyes studied her face. These men are dangerous. They've killed soldiers. Or they've seen something you don't want reported. The accusation struck home. Vanderberg's jaw tightened. His horse sensed the tension and stepped sideways. Careful, Mrs. Washington. Accusations can be dangerous. Truth usually is. Vanderberg dismounted and approached the porch. His boots left deep prints in the soft earth. You think you know something. I know my husband was murdered. The words carried across the morning air. Vanderberg's expression didn't change, but his hand moved closer to his sidearm. Your husband died in an accident. My husband died investigating you. Prove it. Mitchen's fingers tightened on the porch railing. I intend to. Vanderberg climbed the steps. Up close, his face showed the wear of corruption. Lines etched by compromise and covered sins. Ezekiel Washington was a stubborn man, he said. Quietly, couldn't leave well enough alone. He believed in justice. He believed in interfering with military operations. He believed in stopping thieves. Vanderberg's mask slipped. For a moment, his true nature showed through. Cold calculation and absolute ruthlessness. Your husband asked too many questions, he said. About weapons shipments. About missing inventory. About things that weren't his concern. They were his concern. He was a soldier. He was a problem. The admission struck Mitchen like a physical blow. Vanderberg had just confessed to murdering her husband. The truth she'd suspected was confirmed by the killer himself. You sent him on that patrol, she said. I gave him orders. You gave him a death sentence. Vanderberg's hand rested on his pistol grip. I gave him a chance to mind his own business. He chose differently. He chose justice. He chose to die. The morning wind carried the scent of distant rain. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon. The land itself seemed to hold its breath. The Apache men, Mitchen said. They have evidence. They have nothing. They have papers, shipping manifests. Correspondence. Vanderberg's eyes narrowed. Papers can be destroyed. Truth can't be. Truth is what I say it is. The colonel's arrogance was complete. He'd grown so powerful that reality bent to his will. Justice was whatever served his interests. Not anymore. Michan said. Vanderberg drew his pistol with practiced ease. The barrel pointed at Michan's chest. Call them out. No. I'll kill you where you stand. Then you'll have to explain another body. Unfortunate accident. Widow killed resisting arrest. Vanderberg's finger tightened on the trigger. Death was a heartbeat away. Michan felt the weight of choice settling on her shoulders. She could surrender, could save herself, could return to the peaceful life she'd built on lies and ignorance. But Ezekiel's voice echoed in her memory. A man's character showed clearest when everything was at stake. Arthur, she called. John, come out. Both men emerged from their hiding places. Arthur limped from the barn, his wounded shoulders stiff. John rose from behind the well, empty hands visible. Smart choice, Vanderberg said. Is it? Arthur and John approached the porch. Their faces were calm despite the circumstances. They'd accepted death as the price of truth. Colonel Dutch Vanderberg, Arthur said. We meet again. You should have stayed hidden. Some things are worth dying for. Vanderberg kept his pistol trained on Michan. Drop your weapons. Arthur unbuckled his gun belt. The leather hit the ground with a soft thud. John had no weapons to surrender. The papers, Vanderberg said. Where are they? Safe, John replied. Not for long. Vanderberg gestured. To his men, soldiers began closing in from all directions. The net was tightening. You killed a good man, Arthur said. I killed a fool. Ezekiel Washington was worth 10 of you. Vanderberg's face flushed with anger. Your noble buffalo. Soldier was a meddling fool who couldn't follow orders. He followed his conscience. His conscience got him killed. The colonel's rage was showing. Years of corruption had eaten away at whatever honor he'd once possessed. He'd become a hollow man filled with greed and violence. He was investigating. Your arms sales, Michan said, getting close to the truth. He was threatening military operations. He was threatening your profits. Vanderberg's pistol swung toward Arthur. You both should have minded your own business. Justice is everyone's business, Arthur replied. Justice is what I say it is. The colonel's worldview was simple. Power determined truth. Might made right. The strong took what they wanted from the weak. Not today, Michan said. She stepped between Vanderberg's pistol and Arthur. Her body blocked the line of fire. If the colonel wanted to shoot Arthur, he'd have to go through her first. Move aside, Vanderberg ordered. No. I'll kill you both. Then do it. Michan's hands were steady despite her racing heart. 5 years of hiding had ended. She was finally standing up for something that mattered. Vanderberg's finger tightened on the trigger. The moment stretched taut as a bowstring. Death waited in the morning air. Then John spoke quietly. The papers are already gone. Vanderberg's attention snapped to the young Apache. What? Sent them to the territorial marshal 3 days ago, by courier. The lie was perfectly delivered. Vanderberg's face went pale as winter sky. If true, his entire operation was compromised. You're lying. Federal marshals should have them by now. Vanderberg's certainty cracked. The possibility of exposure gnawed at his confidence. He'd built his empire on secrecy. Daylight would destroy him. Even if that's true, he said, you won't live to testify. Others will. Arthur stepped forward. How many people do you think you can kill before someone notices? Vanderberg's rage boiled over. The careful colonel disappeared, replaced by a desperate man facing ruin. His pistol swung wildly between targets. I'll kill all of you, he snarled, every last one. Then you'll hang for murder, Michan said. I'll hang anyway if those papers reach the right people. The admission confirmed everything. Vanderberg knew he was cornered. Desperate men made dangerous choices. Stand down, Colonel, Arthur said. It's over. It's not over until I say it's over. Vanderberg raised his pistol toward Michan's head. His finger found the trigger. Murder lived in his pale eyes. The reckoning had come. Vanderberg's finger tightened on the trigger. Michan stared down the barrel of his pistol without flinching. Death waited in the morning air. Arthur moved first. His wounded shoulder screamed as he lunged forward, knocking Vanderberg's aim wide. The pistol fired into the wooden porch. Post. Michan dove for her rifle inside the doorway. John sprinted toward the well where the real evidence lay hidden. Vanderberg's soldiers opened fire from their positions on the ridge. The battle erupted across the ranch like thunder. Arthur rolled behind the porch steps as bullets splintered the wood above his head. Vanderberg cursed and raised his pistol again. Michan's rifle cracked from the doorway. The colonel's hat flew off his head. He scrambled for cover behind his horse. "Take the house," Vanderberg shouted. 6 soldiers charged down the slope. Michan worked the rifle bolt and fired again. The lead soldier stumbled and fell. The others scattered for cover. John reached the well and dug frantically in the loose stones. The satchel of evidence was their only hope. Without it, they were just 3 people against overwhelming odds. Arthur crawled toward the barn despite his wounded shoulder. Blood seeped through his shirt, but he kept moving. The barn offered better cover and clear sight lines. Michan retreated into the house as bullets shattered her windows. Glass fragments glittered on the floor. Her sanctuary was becoming a fortress under siege. She positioned herself at the kitchen window. The view covered the main approach from the ridge. 3 soldiers were advancing through the morning mist. Her first shot dropped one behind a boulder. The second found cover in a drainage ditch. The third reached the corner of the barn. Arthur emerged from the barn's side door. His rifle spoke twice. The soldier by the barn fell. The one in the ditch retreated up the slope. "Flank them," Vanderberg ordered. Half his remaining men circled toward the back of the property. The other half maintained fire from the front. Classic military tactics for overrunning a fixed position. Michan moved to the rear window. 4 soldiers approached through the tall grass. She fired into their ranks. One fell, the others went to ground. The house shuddered under concentrated fire. Bullets punched through the wooden walls. Splinters flew through the air. Her kitchen table exploded into fragments. John found the satchel and clutched it to his chest. The evidence was safe but useless if they all died. He needed to escape, to get the papers to someone who could act on them. Arthur's rifle fell silent. He was either dead or out of ammunition. Michan couldn't tell which from her position. Vanderberg appeared at the well. His pistol pointed at John's head. "Give me the papers." "No, I'll kill you." "You'll kill me anyway." Vanderberg's rage boiled over. He struck John with the pistol barrel. The young man collapsed beside the well. Blood streamed from his scalp. "The papers," Vanderberg demanded. John's hand tightened on the satchel. Even wounded, he wouldn't surrender the evidence. His father had raised him to value truth above life. Vanderberg raised his pistol for the killing shot. John closed his eyes and waited for death. Arthur's rifle cracked from the barn. Vanderberg spun and fell. His pistol flew from his hand. A red stain spread across his uniform shirt. "John," Arthur called, "run." The young Apache struggled to his feet. The satchel remained clutched in his hands. He stumbled toward the horses tethered behind the barn. Vanderberg's remaining soldiers saw their colonel fall. Some lost heart and began retreating. Others pressed the attack with desperate fury. Michan's ammunition was running low. She counted her remaining cartridges. 6 shots left. Not enough to hold off a determined assault. 2 soldiers reached the back door. They kicked it open and stormed inside. Michan met them with her rifle. The first man fell in the doorway. The second dove for cover behind her overturned table. She worked the bolt and fired. The soldier's return shot splintered the window frame beside her head. Wood splinters cut. Her cheek, her next shot found its mark. The soldier slumped against the wall. The house fell silent, except for the sound of gunfire outside. Arthur was fighting alone now. His rifle spoke steadily from the barn. Each shot was carefully aimed. Each bullet counted. Van der Berg crawled toward his fallen pistol. Arthur's bullet had torn through his shoulder, but hadn't killed him. The colonel's face was twisted with pain and rage. John reached the horses. His head wound made him dizzy, but he managed to mount. The satchel was secured in his saddlebags. He spurred the horse toward the ridge. "Stop him!" Van der Berg gasped. 3 soldiers turned their weapons on the fleeing Apache. Their rifles cracked in unison. John's horse stumbled but kept running. Arthur's covering fire drove the soldiers back. John disappeared over the ridge, carrying the evidence to safety. Van der Berg's hand closed on his pistol. He rolled over and aimed at Arthur's position. The barn door was open. The Apache scout was visible inside. "You should have minded your own business," Van der Berg whispered. His finger found the trigger. Arthur saw death coming but couldn't move fast enough. The pistol roared across the ranch yard. Mitchen's rifle cracked from the house. Van der Berg's shot went wide. The colonel looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest. "Justice," Mitchen said quietly. Van der Berg's remaining soldiers saw their leader fall. The fight went out of them. They began withdrawing toward the ridge. Arthur emerged from the barn. His shoulder wound had reopened, but he was alive. Mitchen stepped onto her bullet-riddled porch. The ranch yard was littered with debris. Broken glass, splintered wood, scattered belongings. Her peaceful sanctuary lay in ruins, but they had won. Van der Berg tried to speak, but only blood came out. His pale eyes stared at the morning sky. The corruption that had consumed him was finally ended. "Is he dead?" Arthur asked. Mitchen knelt beside the colonel. No pulse, no breath. Justice had been served, but the cost was visible in the destruction around them. "Yes." Arthur slumped against the well. His wounded shoulder needed attention. Blood loss was making him weak. "John?" "Got away. The evidence is safe." "Good." They sat in the ruins of Mitchen's ranch and watched the sun climb higher. The battle was over, but the war for justice was just beginning. In the distance, dust clouds marked the approach of new riders. Federal marshals drawn by the sound of gunfire, or perhaps Van der Berg's reinforcements coming to finish what he'd started. Either way, the truth would survive. John would deliver the evidence. The corruption would be exposed. Ezekiel Washington would finally have justice. Mitchen looked at her destroyed home. 5 years of careful rebuilding lay in ruins, but something new was growing in its place. Something built on truth instead of lies. What happens now? Arthur asked. "Now we see if justice really exists." The riders drew closer. Their intentions remained unclear. But Mitchen was no longer afraid. She'd chosen her side. May her stand. The outcome was in other hands now. The wind carried the scent of distant rain. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon. The land was preparing for another cleansing. The approaching riders wore federal marshal badges, not Van der Berg's reinforcements. Justice had finally arrived in the Wyoming Territory. Marshal Thomas rode point, his weathered face taking in the scene. Dead soldiers scattered across the ranch yard. Bullet holes in every structure. The acrid smell of gunpowder hanging in the morning air. "Mrs. Washington," he called, "lower your weapon." Mitchen set down her rifle. Arthur did the same. They stood empty-handed among the ruins of her peaceful life. "Colonel Van der Berg?" Marshal Thomas asked. "Dead," Mitchen replied. The marshal dismounted and examined Van der Berg's body. His pale eyes stared sightlessly at the Wyoming sky. The corruption that had consumed him was finally ended. Self-defense? Marshal Thomas asked. Justice. The marshal's expression remained neutral. He'd seen enough frontier violence to recognize the difference between murder and necessity. The Apache men who escaped Fort Collins, he said. They came here? One did. John Crow Dog. He's carrying evidence of Vanderberg's crimes. What kind of evidence? Arthur stepped forward despite his wounded shoulder. Documents proving Vanderberg was selling military weapons to Mexican bandits. Marshal Thomas studied Arthur's face. You're the scout who disappeared. I'm the scout who found the truth, and nearly died for it. Some truths are worth dying for. The marshal's men spread out across the ranch. They examined the battlefield with professional interest, counting bodies, checking weapons, reconstructing events. 15 dead soldiers, one deputy reported. All Vanderberg's men. Any civilians? No, sir. 3 survivors. All wounded but alive. Mitchen's legs gave out. She sat heavily on her bullet-riddled porch steps. The weight of survival was settling on her shoulders. Arthur joined her, favoring his wounded shoulder. It's over, is it? Vanderberg's dead. His operation is exposed. The corruption ends here. And then what? Arthur had no answer. They'd fought for justice but hadn't considered what came after victory. The future stretched uncertain as winter sky. Marshal Thomas approached with a leather satchel. Young Apache brought this to our office in Cheyenne. Said it contained evidence of military corruption. John made it, Michan said. Barely. He collapsed at our door. Lost a lot of blood. He'll live? Doctor says yes. Tough kid. The marshal opened the satchel and displayed its contents. Military documents, shipping manifests, correspondence, detailing Vanderberg's illegal weapons sales. This is enough to hang a dozen men, he said. If they were alive to hang, Arthur replied. There are others involved. Officers who knew. Civilians who profited. The investigation will continue. Michan stared at the evidence that had cost so much blood. Her husband's final investigation. The truth that had gotten him killed. What? About Ezekiel Washington, she asked. Your husband's death will be reinvestigated. If he was murdered, justice will be served. He was murdered. Then someone will answer for it. The marshal's promise carried. Wait. Federal authority would bring accountability. The corruption that had flourished in darkness would face daylight. What happens to us? Arthur asked. You'll testify at the hearings. Both of you. Your statements will be crucial. And after that? Marshal Thomas studied the destroyed ranch. That's up to you. The federal men spent the afternoon documenting the scene. Photographing evidence. Taking statements. Building a case that would reach Washington. As evening approached, they prepared. To leave, Vanderberg's body would be transported to Cheyenne. His surviving men would face courts-martial. You can't stay here, Marshal Thomas told Michan. Too dangerous until the investigation concludes. This is my home. This is a crime scene. Michan looked at her bullet-riddled house. Shattered windows, splintered walls. 5 years of careful rebuilding lay in ruins, but something new was growing in its place. Something built on truth instead of lies. I'm staying, she said. Ma'am, I can't guarantee your safety. I don't need guarantees. I need justice. Arthur stepped beside her. I'll help rebuild. You don't owe me anything. I owe your husband. He died seeking truth. The least I can do is help his widow. The marshal shook his head but didn't argue. He'd seen enough frontier. Determination to recognize immovable resolve. Federal protection will be available if needed, he said. We'll manage. The marshals rode away as the sun set behind the western hills. Michan and Arthur stood alone among the ruins of her ranch. Why are you really staying? She asked. Because I have nowhere else to go. That's not a reason. Arthur was quiet. For a long moment, because this feels like home. Home is family. Sometimes family is the people who stand with you when everything falls apart. Michan understood. She'd found family in the most unlikely place, an Apache scout seeking justice. A young warrior protecting truth, bonds forged in battle and sealed in blood. "We'll need supplies," she said. "Building materials, food. I'll ride to town tomorrow. People might not be friendly. Not after today. Then we'll find new people." They spent the evening planning reconstruction. The house would be rebuilt stronger. The barn repaired. The ranch restored to something better than before. As night fell, they sat by a small fire in the ruins of the kitchen. Coffee brewed in a dented pot. Beans warmed in a cracked skillet, the simple meal of survivors. "John will come back," Arthur said. "How do you know?" "Because this is his home too now. 3 people can't run a ranch. Then we'll find others. People who need shelter, who need a place to belong." Michan stirred the fire with a charred stick. Sparks rose toward the star-filled sky, a sanctuary. For anyone who needs it, regardless of race or tribe, regardless of anything except character. The vision took shape in the firelight. A place where justice mattered more than prejudice. Where truth counted more than color. Where family was chosen rather than inherited. "Your husband would approve," Arthur said. "He'd say we're dreaming. He'd say dreams are worth fighting for." 2 weeks later, John returned from Cheyenne. His head wound had healed but left a scar across his temple. A permanent reminder of the price of truth. "The hearings went well," he reported. "Vanderberg's entire network is being exposed." "Good," Michan said. "They want to give you a medal. For your husband's service." "I don't need medals. He does." Michan considered this. Ezekiel had died seeking justice. Recognition of his sacrifice would honor his memory. What kind of medal? Congressional Medal of Honor, posthumous award for exceptional service. He'd like that. John helped with the rebuilding. His young strength was valuable for heavy work. The ranch took shape slowly but steadily. By winter, the main house was habitable. The barn was functional. The property was beginning to look like a home again. Other people arrived seeking shelter. A Mexican family fleeing bandits. An elderly Chinese man with nowhere to go. A young woman escaping an abusive marriage. All were welcomed. All found purpose. All became family. Spring brought new growth. Crops planted in fertile soil. Foals born in the rebuilt barn. Children playing in the ranch yard. Michan placed a new photograph on her mantle. Not of her dead husband, but of her chosen family. Arthur and John flanked her in the center. The others surrounded them. Different races, different backgrounds, different stories, but united by shared values and mutual respect. "What do we call this place?" John asked. "Home," Michan replied. "It needs a proper name." Arthur suggested Washington Ranch, after the man who started it all. Ezekiel would like that. And so it was. Washington Ranch became known throughout the territory as a place where anyone could find shelter. Where justice mattered more than prejudice. Where family was measured by character rather than blood. The Black Widow had found peace at last. Not the false peace of isolation, but the true peace of purpose. Her husband's dream of justice lived on in every person who found sanctuary at their door. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.